friends, welcome back to my channel. 1 year ago, on a very non-special Monday in June, I decided to deactivate my Instagram account. And now that it's been a year, I wanted to have a very casual chat where I can reflect and share my experience of what it's been like since quitting Instagram. And while I do that, I'm going to pull out my pen and ink log and pick a page to work on. I think this time I'm going to work on my ink log because I have been neglecting that one a little bit. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please grab a coffee or a tea or your favorite cozy beverage and an activity to keep you company while we hang out and chat about what my experience has been like after leaving Instagram a year ago. We're going to keep this one cozy and casual. Alright, so let's begin by going back in time a little bit and talking about what headspace I was in when I made this decision. So this time last year, I was not in a good mental health space. I had made the extremely difficult decision to resign from a role that I had worked really hard to get, and as much as it pained me to walk away, I was also trying to balance coursework at the same time, and it was too much for me. And so when it came time to deciding between my job and school, even though it was the riskier decision to decide to prioritize school, I knew ultimately it was something that I really wanted to do. So I was not in a great headspace. Resigning from a full-time, well-paying job felt like a really crazy decision, and it's one that I can talk about in a future video. But after making the decision to pursue this program that I was in, I realized when I had to make a decision between one or the other, I wasn't ready to let go of it. And it was one of those like, okay, I'm really gonna recommit to finishing school. And that was difficult to do knowing that I was more than a year out from graduating. So I had a lot of doubt, and I started spending a lot more time scrolling on Instagram because it felt like this quick distraction method that would give me a break from all of the stress and the worry and the doubt that I was feeling. At the same time, I was doing a lot of journaling, and I was tracking my mood and really trying to understand what was going on, because despite the fact that I had made this really big decision, prioritizing myself and my studies, I was feeling really bad about myself. After lots and lots of reflection and taking a hard look at what was going on in my life and what needed to stay and what needed to go, I made the decision to deactivate my Instagram account. And before I get into why I ultimately made the decision to deactivate my account, I want to acknowledge that my experience is my own, and I know that it is not necessarily going to be the same for others. So please know I'm not coming at this with a recommendation that we should all quit Instagram. My intention is just to share my experience as to why I quit Instagram and what my experience was like over the past year. Okay, so why did I ultimately decide to quit Instagram? So first of all, when it comes to leaving Instagram, there are a few ways that you can do that. One is you can leave your account visible to the public and log out. Like, I would consider that taking a vacation from Instagram. So the way I used to take vacations from Instagram was I would delete the account from my phone, I would log out from my computer, and I would usually put a post up saying, hey, I'm going to be offline for the next while, so if you need to reach me, You can contact me over email or text me, etc. I found that worked to an extent in terms of taking a break from some unhealthy behaviors that I was noticing in myself, like constantly pulling out Instagram and scrolling for hours. But I always felt like it was still there. And so I wanted to explore what it would look like to make a more permanent exit. Now, when you decide that you want to leave Instagram, you also have a few more options. One is you can deactivate your account, and if it's done properly, and we'll talk about that later because I did not apparently deactivate my account properly, your account is not visible, so people will know that you're no longer there, and then you can full on delete your account. And I believe when you delete your Instagram account, that means you can't get it back. Whereas if you deactivate it and then you decide to come back, all of your content is still there. So what I've done over the last years, I have deactivated my account. And if I someday want to come back to it, I have that option. So why did I quit? Well, one pattern that became very clear to me was that I noticed my mood would plummet after spending time on Instagram. And as I just mentioned, I've taken breaks and vacations before, but I always knew that it was there, and I found that it wasn't really giving me that fresh start that I was hoping it would give me, because I would reactivate my account or I would log back in and it would be like I just slipped into old habits and patterns very quickly. I also realized from these Instagram vacations that I would take that I would feel this sense of having to play catch up with all of my DMs, because people could still DM me, or friends' posts. And as a small business owner, sometimes I would get people reaching out to me for commissions or requests, and I would feel really guilty if I took too long to respond to them, because I wanted to still show up in a professional way. But it was hard to do that when I would log into this platform where I would have a mix of personal messages, business messages, and a constant stream of content that was designed for me to consume and stay engaged on the platform. So I also found myself getting lost in photos and stories and reels of beautiful homes and journal spreads and stationery and artwork. I put a lot of pressure on myself to keep up with my friends' posts and stories, and at the same time I felt like I was also constantly searching for photo inspiration to improve my personal projects. And I don't think there's anything wrong with looking for inspiration, but it felt like I was spending more time looking for inspiration than trying to pay attention to what I actually wanted or what I really felt about something. So I wasn't really paying attention to my personal wants and needs. So after journaling about the idea of quitting, I played with this for a really long time, and I started to get serious about it probably a few months before I actually made the decision. And by the time I made the decision, it was one of those moments where I just kind of snapped, and it was, like I said, it was a very unspecial Monday morning. I think I had just caught myself in a scroll session where I was feeling really bad, and I was kind of saying to myself, you know what, this makes you feel really bad. You don't know how to engage in this platform in a responsible way because you always end up feeling not so great about yourself, and I think it's time for you to work on yourself and step away from the platform so that you can make an honest effort in healing some of these unhealthy thoughts about yourself. So I didn't make any kind of big announcement because I didn't really want to draw attention to it. I just wanted to exit quietly, and I deactivated my account. So what happened? Well, in the short term, I'll share a funny story first. So I made this decision on that random Monday, and I remember feeling really proud of myself and also kind of shocked that I actually reached a point where I was willing to completely deactivate my account. And I went through all the steps on Instagram. I had to do it on the web app. It took me a while to even figure out how to deactivate my account. And when Instagram confirmed that my account was reactivated, it said that my account would not be publicly visible, people would not be able to message me, and that I could also come back at any time, which is exactly what I wanted. So I confirmed it. I even took a screenshot of it as a memory of having done this. I deleted the app from my phone, I logged out of the web app, and then I simply moved on. A few months later, I got a text from a friend who wanted to check in on me and see if I was okay, because they had sent me a DM over Instagram inviting me to an event, and they were wondering why I hadn't responded, because when I was on Instagram, I was pretty quick at responding to messages. So that was really annoying, because I was under the impression that my account was not visible this entire time, and it turns out that it was visible, so it looked to everyone like I was still there, and that made me wonder whether I had been missing DMs, because I wasn't getting any kind of email notification or anything like that. So I had to log back into Instagram, which reactivated my account. And then when you reactivate your account after having deactivated it, you have to wait a minimum of a week before you can deactivate it again. I did that. I waited a week, I deactivated it, and then I found out that my account was still visible. So for several months I had to explain to friends that I had deactivated my account, but for some reason it was still visible. So while it was confusing, to please continue texting me instead of DMing me over Instagram. And I don't know, I just think it was really strange. I had all the screenshots that showed that I had followed the steps, and I had the confirmation screen that I had successfully deactivated my account, but for some reason it didn't actually work until I logged back in many months later in December to write a post that explained that I had deactivated my account, but I wanted to keep the account for the memories, so I wasn't willing to fully delete it. But I was going to deactivate it again, and that meant I wasn't going to be able to respond to messages. I went through the deactivation process again, fully expecting my account to be visible, and for some reason, I don't know why, I took the same steps, but it finally worked. So now my account is actually not visible. So anyway, in the short term, not having Instagram made me a lot more aware of just how many times a day I was pulling out my phone to scroll through Instagram. When I would wake up, multiple times throughout the working day for a quick break, right before dinner, right after dinner, right before bed. Oh my gosh, this was the platform that I was using the most. I was consuming content all day, and no matter how much I would log on to Instagram, it never felt like I was done. It always felt like I had to catch up on something, and it was honestly really exhausting. In terms of long-term things that happened, well, I've been tracking my mood consistently for almost a year now, and I've noticed that I have a lot less swings in mood. So what I realized is a lot of my mood swings were linked with the time that I'd spend on Instagram. So if I shared a story and I got a lot of engagement, my mood would shoot higher. I would feel really validated, and I would feel really seen and valued. On the other hand, there were a lot of lower swings. Like, I would just get caught in this comparison trap where I would always feel like I wasn't doing enough, or I wasn't doing things to a certain standard. And yeah, I started to notice that it was an immediate and a long-lasting negative impact on my overall mood. So once I was off it, I found that now my mood tends to be a lot more even. So it's not swinging super high, but it's also not dipping really low. I'm not as irritable as I was. I mean, I still have my moments because I have a lot going on, and when I tend to have a lot going on, I'm not always at my best. But overall, I wasn't quite as irritable, and I wasn't feeling as down about myself. And I think that is one of the best things about it, because I already have a pretty strong inner critic, and Instagram really spoke to that inner critic. I found that I had more time to dedicate other creative hobbies without feeling this urge to document it and think about a headline for it. And I also had a lot more time to dedicate to other hobbies like YouTube or creative projects. And all that time that I might have spent scrolling through Instagram has been repurposed into researching topics that I'm interested in and making videos about them. I also had a lot more time to dedicate to my social life and have meaningful offline conversations that may not always be picture perfect or story worthy, but they really filled my cup, and I really started to feel more connected with the people that I was able to spend more time with. And now when I take photos, I really do so more for my own memory keeping. I think part of the reason why I got so interested in Instagram all those years ago was because of the focus on sharing photos. And I know that I'm not alone in that sentiment, because I think that's what the platform really initially was just sharing photos. And then over time, it started to become like sharing perfect photos. And as someone who used to always take photos just because I recognize I have a bad memory and taking photos really helps me to remember things, I never stressed about getting the perfect photo or the perfect composition. I was more so just taking photos to remember things, kind of like writing down a note in my notebook so I don't forget it. So now I'm not really stressing about getting the perfect frame or hiding details because that photo might end up on the internet. So now I'd like to reflect on some of the challenges and setbacks that I experienced, as well as some of the benefits. One unfortunate outcome is I did lose touch with some friends. I know right now we are all leading very busy and full lives, and having something like Instagram where you can share one update that will reach a larger group of friends can be a lot more time efficient. It takes planning and it takes time to schedule even a 30-minute call with someone. I get that. Not everyone has the luxury of being able to afford that time. So not being there meant that I missed out on those smaller day-to-day details that my friends would share, or even creators that I follow would share. And it did lead to feelings of isolation and disconnection. So if there was ever a reason to go back onto the platform, it would be because I would feel like I was missing out on part of the conversation. So when I noticed this was happening, that I was thinking about a friend or I was missing them, I use it as an opportunity to reach out to them and check in on them. And it wasn't always as easy as it might have been to look up their profile or react and comment on their latest post or story, but it was a lot more intentional, and I think it reset the expectations of our friendship in general. And for the most part, it was a positive change, but in some cases, I did lose contact. The other reason why I would consider going back someday is it's challenging to keep up with some businesses, because it seems like a lot of small businesses and restaurants and coffee shops, things like that, they all update their Instagram accounts more frequently than anything else. So if I'm going out to eat at a restaurant and I'm trying to decide what to order on the menu, I might check out Yelp or an app like that, but I usually find that Instagram has the information about whether they're open, if it's a long weekend, or what their daily specials are. There's a few local shops that will do like ice cream drops on Instagram, and they'll announce their flavors, that kind of stuff. So it's hard in that aspect because it does feel sometimes like you are cut off from being able to engage with these small businesses. Now that I have a YouTube account, I know how time consuming it can be to put together a video. Whereas if you are a small business and you only have so much time, I would think you would want to spend more time creating products for your business or investing in maybe the services you provide. So if it's between dating on your stories on Instagram versus filming and editing an entire video to update, I understand that it's it's not really realistic for small businesses. It seems like Google and Facebook aren't always as up to date as Instagram is. So without an account, it is challenging sometimes, because if I try to look up a business on Instagram, because I don't have an account, I can't really scroll through it without getting prompted to sign in. So that is another pretty major setback or challenge, because it feels like the majority of the businesses that I would want to engage with are on the platform. So I feel like I am missing out a little bit. In terms of the benefits, life feels more quiet. I know this could seem like a negative thing, but for me, this was healing. I've talked a lot about how I have a tendency to get overwhelmed, and even now, I still feel like I'm in a state of overwhelm with all the things that I'm juggling. Eliminating Instagram has been really helpful in terms of when I'm not focusing on school or work, I'm actually able to repurpose that time that I would have spent scrolling through Instagram on other activities that are more restorative and lift me up instead of continue to bring my mood down. So overall, I feel like I've been able to be more mindful about my downtime. Now, when I'm not working or I'm not in school, I'm investing that time catching up with a friend, or writing a letter to someone, maybe doing some crocheting, maybe some journaling. I feel like I've gotten a lot more time back, and that is one of the biggest benefits of being off the platform. Another thing is that I've noticed my impulsive spending has gone down. I noticed a direct connection between scrolling through Instagram and spending money. I was following quite a few home decor, art, stationery, planner, journal creators. So this meant I was constantly feeling like I was being advertised to. And I know that's just the way the platform is designed. I don't blame any of these creators for using the platform in that way. And in fact, I would say I used it very similarly. So the inspiration and FOMO was like constantly alive for me, and I was probably also creating it myself. Leaving Instagram really made the biggest impact on cutting down on my impulsive spending. Obviously, I'm on YouTube, and the issue of constantly wanting things can exist on many platforms. For some reason, I don't have that same problem with YouTube. I think it's because I engage with a lot more long form content on YouTube, so it tends to be a lot more conversational. It's something that I can play in the background while I'm doing other things, whereas short form content that lives on Instagram tends to take up my full attention, and the constant changing between different creators or different things is really distracting. And as someone who already is very easily distracted, I don't really need to engage in a platform that further distracts me. So it can prevent me from being able to do any kind of work, because it's like I'm just sitting there scrolling and not doing anything else. I can't even do something like washing the dishes. I was finding myself in this pattern of being really unhappy, in a really bad mental health space, and then I would scroll through Instagram, and then I would spend money to make myself feel better. And I was sort of creating this cycle of escaping what I was unhappy with on Instagram, and then consuming things to try to make myself feel better, and then maybe not feeling better because I wasn't really addressing my problems, and then remaining in this cycle. So I needed to break it. I want to close off with some final thoughts and future plans. Overall, I would say this was a very successful and untraumatic exit off Instagram. Since I had tried to take extended vacations from Instagram before, I honestly didn't know if my deactivation would last very long, because it was my preferred method of staying in touch with a lot of people in my life. Even some of my best friends who I would normally text, I was just finding that we were constantly convening over Instagram. However, exiting Instagram has allowed me to be a lot more creative in how I engage with my friendships. And even when I start to feel like I must be the only person who's not on Instagram, I know that's not true, and I don't have to look too far to find people who are thriving without it. So my brother-in-law has never had an Instagram account, and he leads a very full life with meaningful relationships and hobbies. And in terms of future plans, until I can better understand how to have a healthier relationship with Instagram, I need to stay off it. When I went back briefly in December to write my post because I thought my account was going to stay visible, it did not take me long to scroll through my feed. And I'm just not ready. It's not to say that I'll never be back. I think there are a lot of benefits, especially for a small business, especially for a creator. It's a lot less of a heavy lift than creating YouTube videos. I totally get that. But right now, it's not for me. And if anything, I would prefer to look into other platforms that could substitute some of those things that I'm missing on Instagram. And I mentioned earlier that this has been my experience, completely cutting myself off of it. But I recognize that this isn't always going to be realistic for other people. For example, if you're a creator and Instagram is an integral part of your business, it's not realistic to completely exit the platform. So it might bring you comfort to know that even engaging in a digital detox for 2 weeks can lead to a continued reduction in overall smartphone and social media use even after that 2-week detox period. So if you're someone who feels like you're really wanting to make a change in your smartphone or social media usage, perhaps even taking 2 weeks off is enough to make a lasting impact on your usage. There may not be a need to take a full break like I did. Even a few weeks can make a difference. And honestly, for me, it did help for quite some time. I think it was more indicative of the headspace that I was in at the time. And I wouldn't say that Instagram caused me to be in that headspace, but being in that headspace and using Instagram was just a really bad combination. And for me, the best thing to do was to walk away. And I really wanted to explore what life could be like without it. And I prefer it. So for that reason, I don't see myself going back anytime soon, but I will never say never. I'm curious if you've made it this far. What is your relationship like with Instagram and social media? I focus this video on Instagram because that is the only platform that I fully exited off of. I still have a Pinterest account. I do have a TikTok account, but I only really use it when a friend sends me a video to watch and I need to log into the app to watch it. I also do have Facebook. That is something that I had deactivated for several years, but now I use it for Marketplace, and I use Facebook groups a lot for my studies. So I do find them to be helpful. And of course, I also use YouTube. So I haven't found that these other platforms impacted my mood in the way that Instagram does. And that's probably because Instagram is my favorite platform. I'm curious to hear what your experiences have been like. And if you are on Instagram, how do you engage with it? How do you find balance when you're using it? And if you're not on Instagram, also curious to hear what your experience is like. Well, if you're still here, thank you so much for being here with me today. I look forward to hearing about your experiences in the comments, and I hope you're doing well, and I will see you soon in the next video. Bye!